Okay, hi. We're going to talk about stress and the effect on blood flow in the heart. A lot of people think stress is just an emotional thing, but it's more than that. It's also a physical thing. When a person's stressed out, you get a big increase in two sets of hormones. The catecholamines, that's like adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol. It's a corticosteroid hormone. Okay, so what is the effect of stress on blood flow? It increases fibrinogen, first of all. Fibrinogen is an important molecule. That's a standard part of the blood clotting system. You know, made in the liver, like acute phase reactant. Fibrinogen sticks red blood cells together. You know, we talked about that, overcoming the zeta potential. It'll stick two RBCs together. When RBCs stick together like a stack of coins, you know, one after another, they then become bulky. Typical red blood cell is about the same size as a capillary, 5 to 7 microns. So when they're all stuck together in a stack of coins effect with the RBCs, it's harder to get through the capillaries. They're more prone to clotting. Blood pressure has to come up. And it's not just fibrinogen that's increased. Factor VIII, antihemophilic factor is increased, von Willebrand factor. And also the platelets are activated, made larger, more ready to clot. So these are 4 of the things that happen during an acute stress moment that predispose the blood to clotting. So there's a net increase in hypercoagulability with psychological stress. And then the additional problem with psychological stress is it tends to be amplified. Typically, a person will be upset about a personal relationship or something else like that, or they felt they got a bad deal on something, whatever it might be. Then they don't sleep so well. Well, guess what? The human body perceives lack of sleep as psychological stress. And what does a typical person do when they're tired and stressed out? They go, well, I'll have a cup of coffee or some other caffeine source. And then what does that do? Caffeine does the exact same thing. It increases catecholamines and cortisol. So they become more and more hypercoagulable in their blood. They push their blood pressure up. And it also is worse if they got one of those type A personalities where they're very high strung. And then they can superimpose on that, you know, putting salt in their food or any type of process is going to have a lot of salt. That's going to vasoconstrict, drive your pressure up more. If they're drinking industrial fructose, it's going to have saturated, it gets converted to saturated fat in the liver. It also causes increased absorption of sodium from the gut and increased production of uric acid as a waste product or when it's phosphorylated from ATP to ADP to AMP down to a waste product of that, which is uric acid, which causes hypertension, also causes rouleau. It's a bridging molecule to a lesser extent than fibrinogen. Okay, so the first 2 hours after an intense emotional event, the person is at increased risk for myocardial infarction. So be careful not to, you know, stress out your old man too much. Men are more at risk, of course, for myocardial infarctions before 50. Women start having a higher risk once they're postmenopausal. They lose the protective effect of menstruation and the equivalent of a therapeutic phlebotomy every month. Okay, what else? The blood pressure is elevated with acute stress from the catecholamines. Over time, if it's chronic stress, the cortisol will cause increased reabsorption of sodium, thus leading to increased volume expansion in the blood system, leading to hypertension as well. The blood becomes thicker. Thick blood is called viscosity, increased viscosity. And of course, we talked about fibrinogen relating to that. The heart rate goes up, and this means a lot more work for the heart. It has to pump at a higher pressure, and it has to pump faster. You can overwork the heart to some extent, depending on how good the blood supply is, if they got atherosclerotic blockages in the arteries of their heart. What else? So this is just the way acute stress predisposes you to having a thrombotic event, which could be a myocardial infarction, heart attack, or it could be a stroke, plugging up an artery in your brain. So in terms of the psychology of it, what I think is a good way to be with your personality, this old emperor of Rome in 180 AD, Marcus Aurelius, he said, a man should be like a cliff, and all day long the waves beat against the cliff, but the cliff does not move. So what that means is there's always going to be a bunch of stupid, annoying stuff every day and tedious stuff, and you just deal with it. Don't get emotionally distracted by it, and you keep your cool. You remain more objective to focus on the next thing you need to do, and in the long run, that works better for everybody when you're like that. So that's sort of Stoic philosophy there. So anyways, that's a quick summary of the effect of stress on blood flow in the heart, and yes, it's a real thing that increases your risk of clotting events.